I'm going to do a couple quick points here and then get out of their way. They're going to do the bulk of the work for this presentation. How many of you in here consider yourself to be activists?
What kind of activists?
Okay, that's not nearly enough. We're going to try and change that by the time we're out of here. How many of you consider yourself to be economists? Excellent, then it'll be easy for me to make this point. Whenever there's a recession, there are two industries that generally thrive in a recession. Does anybody know what they are?
Healthcare.
Fast food. Fast food. Okay, math teachers. Actually, he's close with math teachers. One of them is education, because people can't get jobs, they go back to school to get the skills they need to get good jobs. The other one is entertainment. Not really a necessity, but all reliable statistics show that during a recession, people spend about the same amount of money on entertainment. This is clearly a human need of some kind, but it's also something you need to incorporate into your activism. How many of you can ever remember being a part of a group that felt like a chore to attend? There you go. So when you're being an activist, you need to focus on getting people interested in your group, who want to be a part of your group, and even in appealing to the interests of, I won't say your enemies, but people on the other side. If you just follow the script the same way it's been done over and over and over again, you're going to wind up having bored activists, you're going to wind up not getting the attention your group needs. So one of the things you need to focus on when you're being an activist is being entertaining and then fulfilling that need in people. Another reason you need to try and focus on being entertaining and enjoying what you do. How many of you have ever been to a church service, or even in the last year? Okay, me too. How many of you heard them say something to the tune of, life is happier being a Christian? You don't want to be an atheist because they're miserable, they're unhappy in life, yada, yada, yada. This is a talking point many churches need to be true in order to be appealing. So if you have an atheist activist who's out doing his thing and smiling like a Cheshire cat, being all swashbucklery and fencing and smiling and joking the whole time, this undermines that narrative. You can be working for, you can be holding protest signs or doing something completely unrelated to the nature of religion and still be combating the idea of religion by enjoying yourself. So it's something you need to focus on. And like I said before, successful activism is not a script you follow. If you emulate other groups and just try to do what they have done, you're going to achieve the exact same results. And you want to do better than them. So you need to find some way to make your activism your own. So not only are you not burning out, but so that you're unique, so that you can rise above the noise. It's something that helps your group on so many levels. And the example I want to give you is Skepticon. Skepticon thought outside the box. Before Skepticon, there were not free, huge conferences. There were not anything done on that scale for that type of price. And the only reason it happened is because we didn't know about a lot of the other conferences. We were just flying by the seat of our pants and inventing it as we went. And so we wound up doing something that was outside the box. Now, even though I know what the box is on activism, this is what your group's supposed to do. You're supposed to take these dues and meet at these times, X amount of times per month. I try to ignore it however I can. There's some wisdom in it, but there's always some way to be better. As long as you think outside the box, eventually you're going to achieve something that no one else has achieved, and that is going to be great for our movement. And the last thing I want to talk about is get used to criticism. Hemant will be the first to tell you, I'm sure, it doesn't matter how nice you are, if you're doing something big, if you are changing the societal rubric, you're going to get criticized. There's going to be someone unhappy. They're either going to be upset that you're not being angry enough, or upset that you're not being nice enough, or upset that you're being too vocal or not vocal enough. Learn to listen, but realize that you can't please all the people all the time. Most of those people will be coming to your speaking gigs, most of the time. Make it your own and be okay with that. Otherwise, you're never going to make everybody else happy. I'm trying to think of, how many of you big fans of Winston Churchill quotes? You ever heard the one, you have enemies? Good. Why? Because you stood up for something in your life. There you go. So as long as you're making it your own and you're speaking your position without apology and having fun, that's what it is. That's what it's all about. And these two guys are going to tell you how to do it. The first one is David Berger. Remember, the guy who works.
I call this being an atheist in public. It's a little different than when we come here, but I'd like to give some ideas, examples, and things we found that worked for us when we decided to be atheists in public. When JT asked who's an activist in here, and everyone. You're here, you care. There's different styles for different people. There's people like Sarah Hargreaves. When we're out, she'll go change it. She loves talking to people. Ironically, I'm the quiet one. For some people, this is really easy. Where are my extroverts? You want to? Yeah. You guys are already on board. I'm on flight 2. It's introverts I want to reach. I'm an introvert, and every movement takes a mix of people. Atheism has our fire ring. We've got JT, we've got E.Z. Myers, we've got David Silverman. They're seizing back that fierce monopoly on fire and brimstone. They don't hold back. These are activists that enjoy controversy, they are provocative. When you see an atheist in the media, it's usually because they're creating a stir. They've made some people angry. They want people to talk about what do you really believe in. It's an important conversation. You know, religious believers are not a smooth religious mix. They likely believe different things in the same pew. And we want those people to talk to each other. And things like that will get that conversation started. But that style's not for everyone. You know, we have amazing people like Hemant Mehta who keep our David Silvermans in line. We need every kind of person. We need everyone who has something to add, and that's all of you. The outspoken firebrand, they're just as important as the diplomat who's building bridges. What we have here is an example of one of the most important people you can have out in that activist event. Especially if you're unsure about being there, this is exactly who you want. It turns out a kindly grandma can be the most important person in the world. Spirit shows up.
For the record, the woman in that last picture was my grandmother.
That is
visiting us
true.
in college while we were protesting something. That was my own grandmother.
Here's the thing. Sometimes activism is just you and your idiot friend. A table or something. You know, sometimes you don't even have a table. This is important too, and we do it because it's fun.
What does the sign say?
That says adopt a street in City Springfield, the Flying Spaghetti Monster.
Yeah.
Those signs are going for some reason. They just disappear a lot.
The spaghetti monster's so long.
You know, we can say that, sure. Now again, sometimes you're the idiot, your friend is imaginary. Does anybody know who that is?
Can't see.
It's a guy out on a third campus holding a microphone, reading from his book about his imaginary friend. And I bet none of you have a clue who this guy is. That's not what it is.
I know without be cheating.
Brother Jed? No, we'll get to him. But this guy, we'll get back to this guy. You know, sometimes you get lucky, and it's not just you and your idiot friend, it's you and your idiot friend in an army of pirates. It turns out UPS, if you tell them you're a small business, will send you about 5 You know, picketing is just one form. It happens to be one of my favorites. It's a fun response to a grievance. If you have a group that knows that maybe they think their bullshit flies, and you want to tell them it doesn't. That they need to know that their echo chamber agrees with them, but the rest of us don't. We are the not-so-silent majority. This church had some true believers who went out and picketed a Walgreens for supporting the gay games. The gay games being an organization that makes donations for AIDS research. We found about this the day we were there, and we showed up and let them know people don't agree with them. They weren't too happy. That is a pastor who I assume spoke on Gluttony later. He offered some of his information about his church. I handed him a pamphlet on the flying spaghetti monster. I assume everyone needs to know about that. Alright. What can you do? Don't buy ads. Make news. Activism can be like advertising without a budget. Do things that you enjoy. It should be fun. It's a social event. See what you can do. You can start small. If you're uncomfortable out there in public immediately, get a dog and tape it. Add a bumper sticker to your car. You could wear an atheist t-shirt grocery shopping. They are on sale outside. You can stand out on the street corner and just let people know you exist. Seriously, make news. That's a handsome gentleman up there in the corner of the newspaper for the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. For those of you who know or have kids in college, yeah, it's a lot easier. I'm not going to claim it's just as easy once you leave campus, but in college, sure, we can assemble that army, but you can have just as much fun outside of college after you're grown up. I mean, once you have that job and your boss expects you to show up every day, as opposed to those college professors who are a little bit lenient if you don't. What you can do, plan ahead. A lot of cities will announce their public events. They want people to show up. That's the point. Know where there's going to be people. We're downtown, I think this is First Fridays, and the place is packed. And there's a hunger for secular thought out there. These people, they don't know we exist. There's a festival or gathering every month. I think every month, just get out and be there. When we go out and do this, it is a constant stream of people who are ecstatic to see us. These people want to come out with things, and they just don't know that they exist. We're going to fix that. When? Never. All the time. Anytime. If you have a cause, fantastic. Atheism and activism can be a great reaction, and sometimes it is. Now, this is one of the missed opportunity for us, honestly. This was a story that in Kansas City where a local high school group wanted to print some t-shirts, a pro-LGBT message that said, "Why is it as a culture we are more comfortable seeing two men holding guns than holding hands?" Vision, positive message. Originally, this t-shirt vendor agreed, and they didn't find anybody else. They sure sent us your design. As soon as they saw the design, this artwork goes on the stage. This apparently offended this business owner's Christian sensibilities. Print this message. Unfortunately, we missed an opportunity in this one. We couldn't get people in time. Luckily, we made up for it later. This is downtown on the plaza, where we did have an opportunity to reach out and support the LGBT community. Here's a fun quiz. What was the advertisement featured on that website? It was Penny Pinching Mom advertising sucks. It's expensive and clearly nobody looks at it. Activism just gets you out there and people will look. It doesn't always have to be a response. Sometimes activism can be just guerrilla marketing that people will pay attention to. What are these guys? What are they doing there? There's the old gentleman, Josh and really popular. We reached people that day. Everyone driving on that highway, a lot of them didn't know we existed. Now they do. This cost us a van. That was it. Anytime. Well, if you're lucky, American Atheists will help you to a conference. Buy a real billboard. But you don't always have that opportunity. Where can you do this? Research public parks. Know what streets are public streets, which are private, which sidewalks are public, and which are actually private. Don't assume. You can call the police. The police department, I've talked to several police departments here. They're more than happy to advise you either what the law is, where you can stand, where you should not stand, or who you need to call. They love talking to people. That's why they're there. And important to get the name of the person you talk to and get that phone number, because when the police show up, it makes things so much smoother than who you're actually talking to. I can give you an example. The streets of the Kansas City Power and Light District are bars and restaurants. It looks like they're pretty big streets. They look like public streets and sidewalks. They're not. Actually, it changes on the time of day. And which particular sidewalk you're on, it is a maze of regulation. And you would never know just going out there. Also, consider if a permit's worth it. Is a $100 permit worth the cost of going out there for a few hours? Sometimes not. There's plenty of public streets and sidewalks where you can be just as noticed. For example, this is Liberty, Missouri. There was a Liverpool concert, it's a band, Eagles cover band. Go where people are. There had to be, I don't know, 300 or 400 people out there. Free, it's completely free, stand out there with the banner. This guy, was actually a deist, a really interesting guy. People just come up and talk to you because they're different. A lot of the people, they've never met an atheist. They kind of know what the word is, but they've never met one. This guy has changed his mind. He said, well, I prayed with Jews and Christians, Muslims, never prayed with an atheist. We're talking about what that might be. Now I've got a few introverts. Some of the people will be friendly and some not. You're going to get a wide mix of reactions. If you're kind of nervous, an introvert person, team up. Be with someone else. And it'll make things a lot easier just to get started and just show up. Why do this? Because atheists don't have weekly meetings. When you're out in public being an atheist, we meet each other by random chance because they saw us and thought we looked interesting. Carry a small notepad. These people you find and meet and think you're fascinating, they saw your website, and they're going to immediately forget it. Grab that email address. You can tell them all day, hey, look us up on Facebook, Google Kansas City Atheists. No. Get those email addresses. They do want to hear from you. Just forget it. Me. We do meet people constantly that say they're incredibly pleased to see that we're out doing this. It is the norm to get yelled at by a street preacher. It is not the norm to say, I'm an atheist, you have any questions? People do. They have questions. They're incredibly happy. These people don't know that there's a thriving atheist community. They don't know that we're meeting here today. They would probably love to have come out. They're curious. They're not aware of blogs, friends, conferences. For example, this guy on the right is a seminary student. Arguing from design. Attempted to argue the Bible was historically accurate. And the guy knows biblical history. He thought he did. This, ironically, I don't know the guy on the left, is writing a book on why the Bible's full of crap. And just happened to be walking by. Provides. We set up a table, and as you can see, that it draws a crowd. These people want to come out and talk to us. People want to know what you do and what you're about. And you need to have a wide mix of people These are converts back to atheism. They just need a spark and you do it. Yeah, you'll get those words. Maybe yell at you. They will yell, I'll pray for you, with all the smug they can muster. Sometimes they'll look at you and read your sign, immediately look away. If you look at an atheist, you get 7 years of bad luck. I don't know. We have seen parents driving by with small children and doing these. And children will look at us and lose their soul. But you know what? Sometimes you get surprised. People do care. And they want to know there's a voice that speaks out. They want to know that there's someone like them. This kid felt alone, saw us standing on the side of the road, and had him stop the car, get out and give one of us a hug. Because he knew someone supported him. Why do this? As opposed to getting hugs? You know, sometimes you're out there promoting positive social change, such as equal rights, or the gay community, or you're out there to bring a human face to atheism. These are important. They generate discussion, and they bring change. Now, sometimes a social event can turn into an activism event. Things we didn't call it. It's called Noodle Fest. It's a free, all-day concert in the middle of campus, run by Rob Leary, who filmed Skepticon. And some of the bands have a little bit salty language there in the middle of campus. Those kind of tweak pennies of some of the bureaucrats at school. They weren't a big fan of that. And they threatened to shut the whole thing down. They come out and said, look, you guys can't sing those songs. We're not going to allow it. We just can't have this. Maybe a reminder of what some free speech means.
Yeah, I'm going to interject there. When we did that, the student government called an emergency session that day and passed a student bill that affirmed our right to say whatever the hell we wanted in the school's free speech zone. So that actually worked.
Activism brings change. Why? Here's the how. Be a person who's approachable. Be someone you would talk to. There's a reason that carnival markers, game runners smile, wave, make eye contact. They want you to come over there, and that's the way to do it. The guy standing there playing, looking at his phone, is not approachable. The guy smiling, waving, making eye contact is your new friend. There's a helpful hint. So one thing, don't wear sunglasses. Number 2, and it was perfect. There's a reason the American military, when the troops are out in small villages, reaching out, and there's a very routine patrols to meet the populace, changing hearts and minds, they instruct them to not wear sunglasses. The eyes are that window to the person, and they're so much more approachable when you can see the full face. No one's perfect. Say hi to people. Be interesting. Do something that you think will be fun, and then maybe will attract attention. Use props. Get up there, have a few short sound bites, like "Merry Christmas, God doesn't exist." In our case, have candy. We handed out candy canes in case the atheists got word on them. The kids love them. We're out here at the yearly International House of Prayer conference. It's 100,000 people out there believing in every level of nonsense, faith healing works. And this is me as Santa Claus giving a lecture to probably 20 people in front of me who just had questions. It's all argument from design, but they had questions. They wanted to meet an atheist, and some of these guys were really cool. Now, signs and props are great, but if you're maybe stalled at a traffic light and you have an opportunity, there's a siren's call, if you will, that can be used to reach out to people. Now, Josh, he's going to give us a rendition
Atheism, atheism, get your red hot atheism right here.
That was the most effective technique I have ever seen. People wanted fresh hot eggs. You know what? Have something people laugh at and remember. Use slogans that are catchy, and parody is your friend. Bill Ray out there, who supports focusing on A families, people focus on your own. Here's an example of something good and something not so good. Get up and be noticed. In the background of this picture, there's a large group of people kind of behind us. There's one guy with a marijuana should be mandatory sign. We were out that day promoting Eberhard from Plaza, and ironically, there was a pro-marijuana reformer out there in the same area. The group basically kept to themselves. They sort of sat back off the road there and just sort of had a picnic amongst themselves. I know that it costs a permit to do that. That's not a free event. And they had signs. They were laying on the ground. I'm sure they had a great picnic and talked to one another, but they didn't reach anyone. You've got to get up, stand up, and be noticed. If there's any kind of march, rally, city event, you should be there. This is Age Walk. Kansas City Atheist Coalition was more than happy to be out there. We walked around, we held this banner, and as we crossed over the finish line, there was an announcer as each group came through, and they said, Kansas City Atheist Coalition. We'd like to thank no one in particular for going here. That puts a human face on atheism. It does wonders not just for a great cause like Age Walk, but to change how the public perceives atheists. Signs, signs, signs. They're fun to make, they're fun to read, they're fun to hold. But we're going to a couple of tips. Don't just use flimsy paper. It's painful to hold. It seems like a good idea. It's cheap. You can pick up at Walmart for nothing. But the wind blows it everywhere, and eventually your hand can just get very tired. It's unwieldy. And looks matter. Activism has a lot to do with image. What do you look like? If possible, we used a professional printer these times. About $15. We actually sold one of them to someone who walked by for $25. Take time to craft that message and people will miss. Another thing, keep big font. It needs to be readable from a distance. If you're feeling really crafty, you can put a piece of wood or nail something to the back of the sign. Because you can hold it kind of like that. And this means I can just rest my hands on top of the sign and not have to hold it for hours. And I can still talk to people. This particular gentleman, I believe, told me that since people are nice to each other, God must exist. Quite an argument. He was actually his partner there on the left. I wonder exactly how nice most of the churches are to him. Here's another example. There. You guys know who that is. That's Brother Kid. Everybody knows who he is. This idiot, popular guy. In this area, people do know who he is. He's not going to say, no, he's out there preaching nonsense. But it's just a different cause. Now, back to that guy from earlier, yeah, no one knows who he is. He's terrible. He stands up there with a microphone and just kind of babbles about the Bible. He's kind of really boring. Brother Jed, however, has an act. He's interesting. He has wacky antics. He stomps his feet. He screams slut-shaming. It's offensive, but it gets you to stop. It gives you attention. He attracts a crowd, and he knows exactly what he's doing. Well, that's fine and good to know what you're doing, but a competent debater might show up and you look like an idiot. Never waste someone else's perfectly good effort to draw a crowd. That was so handy. I probably heard that one pamphlet about flying spaghetti monsters with jet around. And that guy is you just got down red, white, and blue sign, you don't know exactly who that was. Are they assholes? Yes. Are they good activists? Yes. They have a consistent message. They draw attention. They look the part. They have professional-looking signs. They're very competent activists. We don't have to agree with them to learn something from them. Well, image can be a problem, such as about how you dress. If you're going to tell people that God hates fags and wear a shirt that says Glee on it, people might not take you as seriously. There is a popular anecdote about a motivational speaker to environmental group of picture heavies. He says, all right, guys, did you get arrested for the environment? Yeah! Did you die for the environment? Yeah! Would you cut your hair and put on a suit for the environment? Your first impression is only what you get. I'm not saying the amount of drum circles is directly related to the success of the movement. But consider your target audience. Try to look like them. Look like someone they would want to talk to. The world's an interesting place. This gentleman downtown wearing a Superman shirt to cape. Get out there and meet your fellow citizens. They're atheists who want to know you. You'll get ignored. You'll get yelled at. Not even get prayed for. I have had an exorcism performed on me. But you'll also meet a lot of new friends. And those atheists will meet community through you. Be different.
Hemant just looked over at me and whispered, do you want to stall while I get this hooked up? Someone pick a foreign language.
French.
I heard Spanish.
Moldovan.
Elvis.
Esperanto. I don't want Orlando Bloom hitting on me. Spanish.
Queen's English.
What, English? English is a terrible language to sing in. It really is.
I sang the American Fancy.
Unless you're singing Happy Birthday. Oh, you're good now?
You can sing a verse.
Oh, love of Christ. Granada, tierra soñada por mí, mi canto se vuelve eterno cuando es para ti. Mi canto chronicling a lot of these different activist groups on college campuses, high school campuses, even a few local groups. What have they done that has been so influential, that has gotten them positive attention, and what can we learn from them? So hopefully while you're watching this, you see some ideas that you want to use some ideas that maybe the college groups around you, the high school groups around you may want to use. Hopefully you'll take away something from this. And part of the reason, this is a study that came out a year ago. Without getting into the details, here's basically what they're saying. On the far left, they presented subjects with a scenario that said atheists are pretty rare in a certain community. And then they judged based on, okay, now that you know that atheists aren't really in this community, let me ask you, here's a scenario, do you trust atheists? And it turned out there was a trust problem. But on the right side there, when it said atheists were common in the area, the amount of distrust of atheists went down. So what does that mean? When people knew there were atheists around, they started to trust them a little more. And same thing over here, implicit distrust of atheists. A control group, there was a level of distrust. When the subjects found out atheists were prevalent in the society, the amount of distrust went down. If you want to do the details on this, I'd be happy to give you the link later.
But the point is, when people know we're out there, it helps all of us.
That's what David's talking about. That's what activism is. Let people know you're there. Let people know what you stand for.
And whether or not they agree with you, it's going to be better for all of us.
You've all seen those studies that say, would you vote for a president in your political party who is a blank?
An atheist is always low on that list.
This is one of the ways we can kind of bring those numbers up. Let's talk about what some people have done.
One thing is, like David said, they were just being bold with whatever they did. This is a group in Indiana, a college group. They raised money to buy their own billboard. And it's hard to buy a billboard. It costs a lot of money. It's a little cheaper in Indiana, especially in rural Indiana. But they raised the money on their college campus to put up a billboard. And that slogan, "You can be good without God," was so offensive to the people in that area
that the student leader ended up on Fox News trying to defend this idea that, yes, you can be good without God. Look at me not killing anyone right now on TV. But that's what it took. It took a sign that wasn't even offensive, and they got so much attention for it. By the way, I have a ton of these. We're going to went through these really quickly. JT's already talked about Skepticon 5. Again, a bunch of atheists in one place, in an area that's not really known for like being friendly to atheists. Hey, let's just gather 1,000+ atheists in one place. You think the media's going to pay attention? Oh yeah.
The headquarters for the Assemblies of God, their national headquarters, is in the same town.
Beautiful. We can invite them in. This is a really cool idea. This is Jennifer Wright, who also writes a blog, but she did a thing at Purdue that said fiction for fiction. We're going to set up a table on campus. You bring us your holy books and we'll give you another fiction book in return. Awesome. And they got donations. I mean, most people have like a classic work of fiction in their collection somewhere that they're not really reading anymore. So that's it. You bring your own book. You have this discussion about why, hey, Jane Eyre is fiction. So is the Quran. So is the Bible. They have that discussion. They're friendly people sitting there waiting to talk to you. And the whole point is question what you read. That's an awesome message to send. And I prefer this type of activism to the similar project done in Texas, which said, you give us your Bible, we'll give you hardcore pornography, because that's kind of the same thing, and they called it smut for smut. This is a little more friendly. So let's talk about something that can be controversial. And this has been happening for a couple years. There's a thing that says, if you draw Muhammad, it's offensive to Muslims. Well, that's fine. If you're Muslim, don't do it. The rest of us don't have to abide by your religious views. So this is a group at University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana. They said, fine, we're going to draw not offensive pictures of Muhammad, we're just going to draw stick figures and label them Muhammad, because surely that won't offend anybody, but it offended everybody. And they did this in Madison, Wisconsin too. But yeah, tolerance, not terror. Just a stick figure. It's smiling. It's not even an angry stick figure. But they were labeled on their campus as a hate group, or this was a hate speech that they were doing because they drew a smiley face, but they wrote Muhammad underneath. So then they said, okay, well, we're not trying to be a hate group, but clearly people are not seeing the point we're trying to make here. So let's do something else. Hey, look, there's Muhammad. The Muslim group on campus actually trailed them as they drew these things. And they started, I wouldn't say vandalizing, but they started modifying the chalk drawings. So this is one example. They got Muhammad Ali. See, he has boxing gloves. Because apparently that's okay. So how do you fight back? Well, now you get clever. So, censor. Is that offensive? What about MUHAM? I don't have a picture of this, but another group just drew ... smile. That's it. They didn't need to write anything. At what point do you say this is a ridiculous rule that you're trying to push on everybody, and you gotta let this stuff slide?
And they got their point across, not only through media coverage, but they got a discussion going through the campus newspaper. They made sure they invited the Muslim Student Association to have a formal discussion about what is allowed, what's not allowed, what's respectful, what's disrespectful. Because really, they're not doing this to purposely pick on the Muslim students on campus. They want to raise a larger point about free speech. But sometimes what you consider free speech, other people consider disrespectful. So you got to balance that out. And that's a great discussion to have on campus. So there's that. Other things. This is at Northwestern University. This is just north of Chicago, where I'm from. At Northwestern, I remember in high school, I'd go on college visits. I went to Northwestern, and one of the landmarks on campus that they show you is the Rock. And the Rock is this place on campus where if you can kind of pitch a tent near it, you got to stake ownership to the Rock the night before. It's yours for the following day. So sometimes campus groups will be like, all right, we're sleeping out here at night because we need to advertise something we have going on the next day. So you will take shifts the night before just to make sure no one else gets it. Well, the atheist group on campus knew that a free speech day was coming up and they wanted to promote it. So they made sure they had dibs on this rock. The next day they knew it was theirs. They painted it completely white. And they gave people markers to draw whatever they wanted to on the rock. And you could draw the most blasphemous thing you could think of. And that's what they did. They wanted to show people, look, it's okay to say bad words. It's okay to write things that other people may consider offensive. Sure, context matters. And we're not just saying run around and scream the F word everywhere. But hey, look, it's not a bad thing to just go ahead and write it. So you actually had some interesting things that people drew. Facebook sucks, apparently you're not allowed to say that. But they drew crosses. And by the way, people have used this rock for other things too. Like I've heard of marriage proposals being drawn on this rock. But for one day, anyway, they said, hey look, we just want people to know it's okay to write like a swear word and we're going to say you're in trouble because of it. And that's a really powerful thing when sometimes you've been told that's a wrong thing to do. This is another group in South Carolina. They know there's a Bible verse that says if you see a heathen, you've got to kill them and you should stone them specifically. So they held up that Bible verse, and for charity, they said, if you give us $1, which we'll give to charity, we'll give you a water balloon and you can stone one of our members of our group. And even the school mascot got involved. But they raised a lot of money for charity in doing this, and they made the point that, hey, not everything in the Bible is as wonderful as your pastor may tell you it is. So that's a really cool thing. Here's another thing campus groups are doing, just to get the word out there. They're politically active, and we definitely need to be doing more of this. It has nothing to do with promoting one candidate over another. This has everything to do with getting people more interested in what's going on locally, because that's where a lot of these church-state battles happen. So these are a couple guys from UNC Greensboro, North Carolina, and they knew their city council. They knew their city council was saying prayers at the beginning of their meetings. So all they did is they showed up to these meetings. They asked for time to make a comment, which just about all these city councils allow you to do. And both of them got up there and they explained in very polite, very respectful, very gracious terms, here's why this is wrong. Here's why a moment of silence might be better. Here's why you should just do away with it altogether. There's no reason to have it. And they went through the list. There was no threat of a lawsuit. There's nothing like that. They're just making their case. What's even better is that this particular city council tapes everything and they put it up on YouTube. And as soon as that happens, you can spread their speeches. And that's anyone who's seen like Zach Wall speak about his 2 lesbian mothers, and you see that video, it's just him talking to the city council. That's powerful stuff when you can see that voice being heard. And by the way, this is in 2010. A year later, they got that thing removed, and their speeches helped. So this stuff makes a difference. This is a guy on the right named Andrew Lovely, and he lives in Maine. And in South Portland, Maine, the guy on the left, his name is Tom Coward, he just got elected as mayor. So during his inauguration, like in many inaugurations, they also had an invocation prayer. So Andrew wrote him a note that said, you shouldn't have an invocation prayer because you're supposed to be the mayor of all of us, not just the Christians in the crowd. And so Mayor Coward actually said, well, why don't you deliver a secular invocation at my inauguration? And Andrew did, and it was This guy's name is Evan Clark, and he actually ran for student body president at his college campus, which is something not nearly enough college activists do. It's just getting involved politically on a much smaller scale. And why is that a good thing to do? Even if you're in high school, run for like student council class president. Why? Because it teaches you how to run a campaign. It teaches you what it's like to run against people who are not bad people, but maybe they do have different ideas. And we want students to get used to doing that because we want them running for city council. We want them running to become their congresspeople. There's a guy in South Illinois. He's, I think, younger than me. I'm 29. He's a little younger than me, and he is a congressman. Why? Because not nearly enough people are running for those seats, especially in rural parts of the area where he's from, and he was really good at campaigning. Well, Evan did this, and not only is he the leader of the Secular Student Alliance group at his school, this is California Lutheran. Like, it's a religious school that he was campaigning for, and they voted him to be student body president. That is such a simple thing to at least try to do, and not nearly enough people try to do that. And this is something we ought to be encouraging across the board. Run for office, doesn't matter how big or small it is. So, that's it. This is another thing that our groups are really good at, and you saw examples of this in David's talk. We're just good at being clever. We have a sense of humor about this stuff, and that's so powerful. So one example of this is more recent. In response to Everybody Draw Muhammad Day, instead of drawing stick figure Muhammads, a group in England, and this just happened last week, they just put a pineapple on their table and said, Muhammad. And the school told them to take it down, and they removed the whole group from the area because the pineapple was too offensive for people. So they came back, actually, no, they said, please put it away. So they said, okay, we won't call it Muhammad, we'll just call it Jesus. See, everything's okay. Then they said, you need to get out of here. A pineapple. This is even, this may be a little more risque, but hey, if you're a college group, this is another group in England. They handed out condoms. And the slogan there says, nothing gets past reason. They put their slogan on every single condom. So hey, if you want to really get the message out, that's one way to do it. Going back to my friend Jen, she did this awesome thing a couple years ago where she heard that a Muslim cleric in the Middle East said the reason there were earthquakes in the world is because women were basically dressed like sluts. So she said, well, then let's just create an event where women dress however they want to, dress in a slippy sort of way, quote unquote, and we're going to cause the biggest earthquake ever, and we'll call it Boobquake. And when you have something clever like that, you create a Facebook page for it, that word spreads. And it got to the point where she was getting nationwide coverage for Boobquake. And believe it or not, the world didn't end that day. So, but why does this stuff get coverage? Yeah, part of it might be kind of the sex appeal of all of this, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that this is a really smart and funny way to show someone who's very serious that he's full of crap. It's powerful. Going back to Brother Jed for a second, this is, I think, Sister Cindy, who's his cohort and some of this stuff. This is a sign one of the groups held, and it's just a quote from the Bible. I do not permit a woman to speak, but to be in silence. With a giant arrow pointing right at her. Talk about making a point. This is my favorite way. I think David showed a picture of JT kind of preaching while Brother Jed was sitting down. That's clever. Here's something else a group in Oregon did. They used his crowd to start preaching their own religion. And let me give you a backstory on this. This group in Oregon is so big. They get so many people at their first meeting that they're not sure what to do. Because you can't just sit around and discuss everyone's personal story about their atheism. So what they did is they separated all the people at their meeting into small groups, kind of like what we're in. And they gave every table a household object. So your job is to form a new religion around this object. So you get a fork. Create the religion of the fork. You create the religion of the microwave. You create the religion of the boot. And everyone had a representative from their table go up and preach their new religion. Well, this guy's group was the boot group. And so when Brother Jed was at his campus, he got up and started preaching the gospel where, hugs are of the devil. But the boots are amazing because they protect us from the evil rain. And look at what we can do. And basically he used all the language that Brother Jed was using, but but to promote something totally weird. And it got to the point where Brother Jed's like, I'm just going to sit down. That works. Or, if you want to get back at any sort of preacher, the group at the University of Illinois, and a few have done this, they just created a bingo card that they hand out so that when people are sitting around, if he says sodomizer, or all gays are perverts, or sluts, you can mark it off your list, and if you get a bingo, you get like an atheist book for a magazine. It's a brilliant way to spread their message while not necessarily like being a jerk, but hey, if you're going to speak and you don't care what you have to say, we're totally going to take advantage of that, right? Don't let a bad situation go to waste there. This is one going on in Texas. They had a National Blasphemy Day, kind of like the Drum Muhammad Day. And they said, you can sell your soul for a cookie. Just sign this paper, sign over your soul, we'll give you a cookie. They even had little gingerbread men cutouts on a big poster on the wall, and every time they got a soul, they colored one in. Just to make the point that this is just an idea. You don't actually have a soul. It's just a metaphor or whatever. But hey, you get a cookie out of it if you want to do it. So just go ahead and do it. It's not a big deal. And they actually got a big crowd coming there because, one, free food and college students go together. But two, I mean, there's got to be some people there that were like hesitant to do it. And until someone said, "Are you joking? Just sign the paper and get the cookies." You're not getting them you're not getting a credit card out of this. Just sign the paper and get the cookie. And a similar thing, this is at Center for Inquiry in Michigan. The group set up a table to just say, send an atheist to church. They said if you give a donation to charity, you can decide where we go to church locally in the area. We will go with you to your church if you want. And in return, afterwards, we're going to have a group meeting where we'll talk about our church-going experiences. Don't know where they got that idea from, but it's a really good one. But it's a really powerful thing to have Christians who totally want to bring atheists to their church. Fine, we'll go with you, but afterwards we're going to fact-check this whole thing, and we're going to have a discussion about it, and that's a really cool thing to do. Another thing our groups are really good at, being charitable. Like David said, one of the hard things to do is deal with a smiling atheist because it goes against all the stereotypes. Well, giving to charity is something else that goes against all the stereotypes. Everyone thinks that religious people give more to other people. And that's not necessarily true. I think what is true is they have a better infrastructure to give to charity. So anytime atheist groups can provide some way for people to help other people give to other people, we take advantage of that. So some groups have done some really cool things. This is a group in Colorado. They said, if you can give us non-perishable food items that we can donate to a food bank, we will give you a banned book. And they actually got money to buy banned books. They got donations of banned books from around the country. But again, really successful food drive. This is a group in northern Iowa. They did a very similar thing. They saw on campus that a Christian group was going to do a 24/7 prayer service. We're going to pray for 24 hours straight, 7 days during the week, and they'll rotate in shifts. And they're like, well, that's not going to help anybody. So they did a 24/7 service week, and every day they did something different in their group, whether it was going to a nursing home and having conversations and playing games with the residents there, or they ran a blood drive one day, and they got everything necessary to do that. Which one of those two groups made a bigger impact on the world? That's a powerful message to send along. This is another group that Brother Jen was at, and they said, hey, he's going to come to our school. Are you going to help? According to Brother Jen, you are. So they got money donated, and basically they hovered around Brother Jen, and as people walked by, they would basically have out a bucket that people could throw in some coins or some dollars, and they spread that money between 4 different groups, all of which were groups that Brother Jen was condemning. So you had the atheist group on campus, the women's rights groups on campus, the GLBT group on campus, and each of those groups got a couple $100 at the end of the day with all those donations. So I love that name, Donations Against Damnations. That's awesome. This is my friend Leslie. Leslie heard this statistic that, or not a statistic, the general belief is that when people go to jail, how often do you hear stories about how they found the Bible, they read the Bible, and they came to Jesus while in prison. And she kept thinking to herself, how come you never hear anyone say, yeah, I was in prison, but then I read the God Delusion and it changed my life? Never happens. And why not? It's because there's so many Christians wrote to a bunch of atheist authors, and she asked a lot of people if they would donate so she could buy books, and they donated all these atheist books to her, and she would put them in a box and send them to various prisons around the country. And what's amazing about this, I guess I had a stereotype in my mind of what a prisoner's education level would be like. She shared with me some of the letters that she got from prisoners, and oh my God, they were so grateful. They're like, oh, thank you for sending me something that's not the Bible. It was so amazing reading St. Harris' The End of Faith. It's just such a breath of fresh air for her to say those things. It's amazing. She actually had to stop this project, and the reason was the shipping costs got too high. Because it's a lot of money to send these really heavy boxes of books to prisons. But just that sort of idea, let's find these groups that could definitely use these books and get them to them in a way that, these prison libraries will take what you give them because they're desperate for anything. So why not give them some literature that will open their minds? This is another really cool thing. When I was in college, I'm sure a lot of you had this when you were in college, over spring break, there are a lot of groups out there that say, we will take you to some place around the country where you can help people who are in need for the full week of spring break. Alternative spring break is called, or something similar to that. Well, the group in Illinois, the atheist group in Champaign, they said, we don't really have enough money by ourselves to go, but we know the Christian group on campus, one of the Christian groups on campus, is going to New Orleans to help people victims of Katrina a few years ago. So they actually asked the Christian group, can we tag along with you? We'll donate whatever money we can. Can we go with you? And they were more than happy to get more people to go on this trip with them. I think they actually ended up taking a few different cars. And they said the conversations on the long drive to Louisiana were awesome. Because, when you're surrounded by atheists, it's very hard to find topics that we're really going to debate. But when you're in a car full of Christians who are also in college and very passionate about it, you get really good conversations going. And so this is them in Louisiana doing the work that needed to be done. And they did it again the following year. In fact, that idea has spread to the point that the Secular Student Alliance now has a packet for groups who want to do this in terms of how to do it, what you need to prepare. So it's become a really good idea. The last thing our groups are just really awesome at, this is why it's so important to have groups like this one in Kansas City, to have college youth, it's just being there. Like David said, when that guy stepped out of his car, it's just like, oh, thank you so much for standing on the side of the road with the sign that says atheist. How amazing is it when you think you're the only person out there who doesn't believe in God, and you find out there are so many other people out there? Just letting yourself be known is a powerful thing. This is a group in Alabama. This is their logo. We believe in good. And they have this happy, smiling, awkward-looking face. And it's so welcoming. You want to be a part of that group. As opposed to, whatever group might have a pitchfork and hellfire, welcome. Don't do that. That's weird. This is another project the SSA has really started pushing. We do this at high school and college. It's called Ask an Atheist. And all we say is, look, set up a table, we'll give you the signs you need and everything, but basically the sign says, Ask an Atheist. And all you gotta do is sit there. The sign is hopefully encouraging people to come to your table. If they've never met an atheist before, you know what questions they want to know. How do you get through the day? How do you get your morality from? Are you a bad person? Basic things like that they don't really have answers to. And here you are with a smiling face ready to answer them. There's a high school in Illinois where a couple kids, they weren't part of a group, they just wanted to do this themselves. So they asked the principal if they could set up a table in the cafeteria, and they did it. They got a sign that said, Ask an Atheist, and they just set up shop in the cafeteria. And kids came up to them. They were not walking around bringing people to them. But a bunch of kids walked up to them and asked them what they were doing, what they were talking about, and they had good conversations. One parent found out about this. And maybe her kid texted her during lunch, I don't know. But she was so furious that the school would allow this promotion of atheism, which it's not, that she pulled her kids out of school for the rest of the day because the idea that atheists are answering questions was so offensive to her. I think we get the upper hand in that case. But again, just being there, answering people's questions, not making them feel like idiots for asking questions that we all know the answers to, but they don't. That's a really nice thing to do when you can ask what you think are really dumb questions to people who are like, oh, that's a great question. Let me give you an answer to A year or two ago, the Chicago Tribune called me up and they said, hey, we're trying to do a story on like local atheists. Do you know if there are any like college groups in the area? I'm like, I know many. Let me send you to all of them. And this reporter went to a bunch of these groups' meetings and she got to know a bunch of the students involved. This is the cover of the Chicago Tribune magazine that week. It's in every Sunday paper. Just call the Unbelievers, because that's a catchier name, I guess. But the faces that she's talking about, just smiling students, happy students. You read the article and it's these profiles of these people who left a really domineering sort of church environment or really strict structures, and now they don't believe in God and their life couldn't be better. It's an amazing story. And by the way, just to be clear, what's the story all about? Atheists exist. That's the story that they're pushing here. Isn't that amazing that that in itself is a story? This is in the New York Times a year ago. This is a high school group in Florida. And again, what's the whole story about? The whole story is there's a high school atheist group in Florida. That's the whole story. And they talked about how once they started having these meetings, a lot of students started joining. And toward the end of this article, there were a couple interesting quotes. One was from a girl who said, basically, I can't tell my parents where I'm at right now. So I tell them I'm at Ocean Club. It's like, really, you gotta go to that depth to hide what from your parents? That you're meeting a bunch of other people who are really good people. So that's one thing. And there was another quotation from another girl who said she didn't want her dad to find out where she was, because her dad was like a military guy, a Navy guy, so she just lied to him. And she said, if I tell him the truth, he's going to be really upset. I don't want to hurt our relationship. And the fact that the whole story is about, look, these group of students who normally don't have anywhere to go, they're meeting, and they're having these amazing philosophical discussions and talking about what it's like to live without God. And yet, even for that, they have to hide that secret from their parents. It's amazing. The faculty sponsor of that group actually said to me that I asked him, how did you become a faculty sponsor of this sort of thing? And he said, you know, I teach a philosophy class, and one year some kids just said, would you be willing to be a faculty sponsor? And the reason they knew they could go to him is really incredible. A few years ago, he's been teaching for like 30 years, and a few years ago, students would come up to him. Every year they would say, where do you go to church? And his teacher would answer to them, probably like I would answer my own high school students. And he would say, well, you know, I don't really talk about that with my students. I think that's a personal decision. So with all due respect, I'm not going to answer that question. And that's fine. You kind of just avoid the topic. It's a touchy subject. You don't want to get in trouble. The amazing thing he said was that when those same students asked their other teachers where they go to church, the Christian teachers never said what he said. They always said, oh, let me tell you where I go to church. I go here, or I go here. You should come with me one day, or something like that. He's like, how come they're so honest about it? How come I'm the one hiding who I am? So finally he said, all right, I'm going to stop doing that. So the next time kids asked him where he went to church, he said, you know, I don't go to church, and my wife doesn't go to church. We're both atheists. And that was it. And it wasn't a big deal, and he didn't get in trouble for it. And then students came up to him and said, could you be the sponsor of our atheist group? He's like, yeah, sure. The students lead the group. He's just there kind of to moderate, to lead. But he's not changing their minds. He's not doing anything other than being there for them. And that's a powerful thing. He said after this article came out, so many other faculty members and students sent him such nice emails, and so many people sent the school atheist books that his entire bookshelf in his classroom was just lined with literature for the students to check out if they wanted to read it because they couldn't take it home with them. So again, what do you have to do for these kids? If you're a student, you just got to start a group because you're allowed to, and JT will tell you all about how easy it is to start a group, even though the pressure might be there for you not to. And if you're a faculty member, let the students know. You're totally allowed to just answer their questions honestly if they ask you about it. There's nothing stopping you from doing it. And just one last thing. I love seeing this on Facebook. There's always different campaigns that do this, but they just say, show the world you're an atheist. Maybe it's on Reddit, maybe it's on Facebook or something else. But people hold up these signs, and maybe it's the Scarlet Ape, or maybe they're wearing like whatever button you want to, or a ceramic, but they have these signs. I'm an atheist, and I'm happy, and I'm loving. I'm an atheist that didn't comb his hair this morning. Yes. I'm an atheist and I also speak Spanish. Hello. I'm an atheist and I love you. What does this do to all those prevailing stereotypes of atheists being evil, immoral, bad people? This totally changes everything they do, or everything they think about atheists, and it makes it very welcoming. It's as simple as changing your Facebook religious profile. You don't even have to change it to atheist. We tell our students at the Secular Student Alliance, look for agnostic, look for humanist, look for pastafarian, look for non-religious, look for any variation of them, because no one cares what label you use, but we want you to be okay with saying you're not the same as everybody else. You don't believe what everyone else believes. And this is a great way to make it happen. This is great activism, and it requires so little effort, so I hope you can do it. So anyway, if you have any other ideas or questions, I'd love to know about it, but I will toss it back to JT, I think.
I'll toss it back to Sarah.
I'm tossing it back to Sarah.
That was terrific. I didn't see, it didn't occur to me that I needed to, but I didn't see Dr. David Berger's presentation before he just gave it just now. And Hemant, you're fantastic. But I was totally blown away by David's presentation. And maybe Okay, so thank you, Hemant. Thank you, David. Thank you, JT. That was truly phenomenal.
Oh, I thought we were going to do questions.
We should do questions. We're running crazy overtime though, which is all my fault. But so we should.
How about one?
So I'm more than happy to take questions. I just wanted to, for maybe people who have other things that they're doing today, this afternoon, that we are running really behind. We should. So JT should begin the closing speech 15 minutes ago. So I'm more than happy to hear, if we have questions answered. I just wanted to make everybody aware of that. So I guess let's just start doing. So we'll just proceed with I'll hand the mics to the questioner. No. You guys have to go up on stage. Hemant and JT and David have to go back up on stage. So you can stand up there and answer, and I'll pass around the mic for people who have questions. Amanda.
Okay, and I'm live. And this was kind of a pet peeve of mine because when I'm a speaker and people just do comments, it pisses me off, so I'm going to do it to you guys. I co-founded a group called Iowa Atheists and Free Thinkers, and one of the things that I find is really difficult is when you transition from college to non-college groups is what do you do? Because a lot of the things that you guys talked about are really easy for college groups to do. And one of the things that I found, like for KCAC or for Iowa Atheists and Free Thinkers, is parades and community groups like farmers markets and things like that. When we marched for the first time in the Gay Pride Parade in Des Moines, Iowa, about 4 years ago, there were only 4 of us because everyone else was afraid. Carried a banner and we threw out candy, and we got more cheers than the transvestites. They were so excited that we were marching in the parade because they had 12 churches and then us. And so then we had a booth and we were swarmed. We had a church on one side of us, a church on the other side of us. Nobody came, but we had people packed 45 deep to sign up on our newsletter, and most of them were parents of LGBT students who were so excited there was an organization that was supportive of LGBT and was not a church. And that's how we got some of our best members, was parents of LGBT students who were looking for something besides churches. And we used to go to the farmers markets, and they still do. And we had flag temporary tattoos, and we gave them out, and that pissed everyone off because the kids wanted the tattoos, and I actually put them on them, and so then they run over to our booth, and we got like people who walk and put their hands in front of their kids' eyes so they wouldn't see the word free thinkers or atheists, but then the kids wanted it, so they had to come over, and of course then they wanted the cool magnets or the cool stuff that we had, the swag on our table. So we gave over 300 tattoos away in one day at our farmers market. So there's all kinds of stuff that you can do as an activist too when you're a non-campus group. It's a little bit harder to find places to drop chalk when you're not on a campus. Drop chalk on it, but parades are a really great way to do it. It's very inexpensive and really fun. So sorry I did that to you guys.
The easiest Q&A
I've been an activist for 30 years at least, and I just want to tell you, I just got some really great ideas from you guys, and this has just really been an excellent conference, so thank you very much.
Okay, LGBT stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender.
Oh.
Did they add another letter there recently?
They've added some questions.
Yeah, all of them.
My thoughts together. The biggest critics for when I do activism with my student groups is actually from my own members a lot of times, and I have about half the members who really want to get out there and make our voices known, and then half the members argue that since our goal as a student group is to create a safe community, that activism, in-your-face activism, is actually goes against that and makes it other people hostile toward us. How would you respond to that?
I can take this first. I did mention this when I mentioned the Muhammad drawing one. At both of those campuses, at U of I and UW-Madison, where those chalk drawings took place, I would say about half the group was very opposed to doing it specifically for that reason. They thought that was more offensive than it was eye-opening and thought-provoking. And I think in those cases, they had robust discussion about what they were doing and why they were doing it, so just to make sure everyone was on the same page. And after that discussion, they took a vote. Now, the chalk drawings ended up winning, that's why they did it. But I would say, look, yes, there are going to be people who don't want to be in your face, but there are other ways, some of which we highlighted here. There are other ways to do it. You don't have to do one method all the time. And I would say, hey, if someone in your group doesn't like a particular method, hopefully there's something else that they would want to do that you can bring them into, even if it's not that particular event. Not everyone has to love everything you do. But hopefully you can at least address their needs and make sure they're not feeling just left out because they disagree. That would be the worst thing you could do. But you want to take their input and see if there's a way to bring them into.
I don't want to feel that one too. I would have two suggestions. First, I love you. Second, the SSA will support more than one campus, or one group at campus. So if you have one group of people who really feel strong about doing a very passive behind-the-scenes type activism and one that feels very in your face, separate the two, do two different groups. And then you guys can work together on different projects, you can have access to the same number of grants and materials. The other one is, if I was a leader, I would simply say, there's no reason that we should be dedicated to one mission in activism. All of these have pros and cons. The best we can tell you is that you don't have to participate in every bit of activism we do if you're not comfortable. But we don't want to deny it to those other people, just like we don't want to deny the friendlier activism to you. So we can definitely partition our group in that way.
David, say something.
We create a safe community by letting people know we exist. If there's atheists that feel alone, they don't have a safe community, and they need to know where we are. If people aren't okay with atheists, that's their problem, and we're going to drag that atheist into sunlight and make it a deal with us.
Famous atheist blogger, pseudo-famous atheist blogger, and he's the wisest one on the planet.
I know!
He works for me!
No, it works for me.
So, I'm curious, now that you're off campus, do you have off-campus groups that you lead or join? What groups are you part of? And I guess I know Dr. David answer. So, actually, you're part of it.
Sure. I don't take part in any local groups in Chicago. I am leading a group that's doing a Light the Night walk, where we're trying to raise $1 million for Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and so that's taking place at the end of the month. After I graduated, I discovered that I really like the online blogging sort of activism and what I can do through there. But again, there are a number of campus groups that have formed in the wake since I graduated. There's a lot of meetup groups and local groups in Chicago. Not as many really big off-campus groups in the area. Like a lot of small ones, but nothing as big as something like this, even though it's a big urban area. So that's unfortunate, but I think the amazing thing is that just means there's a lot of really cool activists out there kind of doing a lot of different things, which is not a bad thing.
Now that I'm a blogger and writer for a living and have the following that I do, I don't do hardly any of the community endeavored to use whatever status I have to empower local groups and to give them attention and to give them advice. And I got the skills for doing that by being, you saw the pictures of David's presentation, but by doing a lot of that. And I realized the need for what I do now, but honestly, if I were to be serious about what my preference was, I miss being on the ground and pissing people off and holding signs and interacting with people that way. And I would go back to it in a second if I didn't think that what I do right now is also needed.
If I could plug a small group of kids,
It's probably something for you tax exempt for your donations, but all of it.
Any other questions? David is very smart man, but he mumbles. David, do you want to just repeat that, please?
give us your money.
Dr. Berger, you spoke about how we need to make sure we have the right image that we're putting out there. And certainly there are people who want to be more aggressive and people who want to be more passive. Is there a certain threshold at which in-your-face activism crosses the line into bad publicity, and where do we find that line, if so?
Always attack ideas and not people. If people have bad ideas and cling to them relentlessly, that's their problem. But in-your-face activism is to get attention. It brings people to you. That's why we need all kinds of people. Once the in-your-face activism, people come and talk to you, they know you exist. We have the bridge builders. There are people who want to talk about them. Their organization, we are more than happy to work with churches in our philanthropic events where we'll work with like a rescue mission, delivering meals. And those are just as important. So that activism is additive. It brings people to you. And then once they're to you, we say, hey, look at all this other stuff we do.
I would argue that for an atheist group, I mean, you don't have to do very much to piss people off. You can, and that's the thing, you can, and I worry that, and like I mentioned, there was that smut for smut, like the porn trading for Bible stuff. I think that probably does more harm than good. I think there's a lot of atheists included who would walk past them and say, I don't want to be a part of that group. And at that point, I think you're doing more harm than good for your group. At the same time, I think for Skepticon, one of the billboards they put up this year, advertising Skepticon, was the point was, let's be as deliberately inoffensive as possible to see if anyone gets worked up over it. Because what did the billboard in Kansas City say? Like, godless government now. Godless government now. Church and state separation. That's not an offensive idea. How much hate mail?
There was so much talk on the Facebook page, though. I mean, just talk about the semantics of the use of the word godless, and interestingly, even not, I don't think hateful, but some even back a little bit of backlash from people who support the message or who are atheists themselves, but I prefer the word God free.
Yeah, you're never going to win. But I would say, like the billboard I showed earlier, like you're going to be good without God. That will offend people. If your goal is to be in your face aggressive, that's a way to do it. It's not as passive as it seems like in our crowd. Because there are religious people who are going to be upset by that. The Skepticon billboard that they put up this year just has pictures of cute kittens. And it says kittens. Kittens are cute. Kittens are cute. Just to see, and with the atheist website underneath, just to see if anyone would get upset. But the point being, atheists can do just about anything, and the fact that we exist is offensive and aggressive to a lot of religious people. So I'd say, in my opinion, you don't have to cross the line that much. And something that we all know is not in your face will be seen that way by other people. So I think it's to our disadvantage to try to really push that further than it needs to be.
I mean, David, obviously I heard you talk more about this, and maybe I can connect to you, Josh, but we have conversations, in our board meetings a lot, I feel, about moderating the tone. What tone do we want to strike? How offensive do we want to be? The signs that David highlighted in the picture, probably either stands for the separation of church and state, where we protested the International House of Prayer, was that between that one and then the Judgment Day Not Happening event, where we held up the signs that said things like the end is far, truth brought to you by science, smile, there is no hell. Those are probably the most offensive, inflammatory type activism events we've ever done. Everything else is literally, like David said, showed, where we're holding up our banners that say things like morals without pathology, and then handing out our, pamphlets explaining what it is to be an atheist. And which again, like Hemant was saying, is pretty, pretty passive, just saying atheists exist. But even those type of events get a lot of, cause a lot of rabble rousing. And I would say, David, I'm going to turn this over to you in a minute. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say the sign that says "Smile, there is no hell" received the most. There is a hell, most kind of like visceral reaction. Like people were like, "There is a hell, and you will go there." And my favorite quote of all time is from an event, and that was a guy driving by. I have to say, he was driving by in a pickup truck, and his friend, leans out the window and says, "Praise Jesus and fuck you." I don't know if David, you and I are going to talk about the tone. We've really tried consciously to decide what we say.
So one of the events we did was Ask an Atheist up in Liberty, which is a kind of cult-like conservative town. If you're in the Kansas City area, I'm a proud citizen of the local area. And we just had signs that said, got a question, ask me, I'm an atheist. I mean, this is really just a factual statement. We're not making fun of anyone, we're not criticizing anyone. And we got people who would just kind of walk by us and say, "Hope you're fireproof. Have a good time burning." And then of course, the God bless you, or Jesus loves you, or they make it sound like an insult. You can find the most, and it really makes me want to go back and do it again, because these are really benign, passive, non-offensive things that really piss people off, and it makes me happy that they get so upset over something that is so simple and innocent.
We don't need to cut it away to offend them. We offend them by existing. And if we're already going to, do the time, we may as well do the crime.
So do you think it is possible, or should atheists even try to promote something called critical thinking in schools? We're not really promoting atheism per se, we're just promoting critical thinking.
Absolutely we should. I mean, hey, I am a public school teacher, I teach math, and I think every teacher I know in my school, atheist or not, wants to get that message across, because we don't want kids regurgitating ideas. We want to present them with new situations. So how do we do that? Well, in my class, we talk about certain math skills that you need, but on the tests I give them things they haven't seen before, but they got to be able to figure it out using that material. We try to do, if you're a really good teacher and they use this every time you go to one of those professional development things, at least in my subject, you don't want to be teaching the kids all the formulas. You want to let them figure out what the formulas are, because that's what you want to get through. And I think if you could teach that way, and that goes for any subject, if you could teach that way where they're figuring all this stuff out on their own, and they're asking the right questions, and your job is not to just give them answers, but it's to prompt them to ask the right questions that they should be asking. That's what's going to benefit these kids when they graduate. Like JG said here, I don't think anyone's questioning whether we ought to be teaching critical thinking. We absolutely should. And I think every school I've been to, every development conference I've been to, they encourage that, and they offer ways to do that. That's a really tough thing to do, but it's important, and that has nothing to do with religion. It just happens to be a byproduct.
Okay, let's do one more question if we could, and then we're going to definitely take a bathroom break, and then we're going to let JT give his closing talk, which is going to be in Continent 1, so where we just came from. Another question? Did we answer all the questions?
Does God exist? No, awesome.
Okay.